Hello my fellow adventurers, Ryan here from D&D Awakening. Join us on our travels today with a new D&D adventure. But before we begin, why not subscribe for daily D&D content? And please feel free to show the channel some additional support if you find yourself liking the video by hitting that like button and maybe leaving a comment below. The engagement really helps us to reach more people and grow our community. Thank you for the support, and on to the adventure. Murderhobo gets hit with divine judgment after messing with the wrong cleric. Our story, dear reader, begins at our local high school. Myself and several friends of mine scheduled after school sessions every week, a sort of unofficial club. Originally, we started with a group of 6, and once word got out we managed to bump it up to 11. Friends of friends or girlfriends joining to see if they had the feel of it, and others were avid players just interested in playing. Well, one weekend our DM's birthday arrives, and we are all invited. We all pack up our computers and plan on having the whole weekend having as much of a blast as possible. After the first day of online gaming, we decide to have ourselves a session since we are not restricted to the school library and can have more fun. Seeing how this is a spur-of-the-moment session, we all take our time making our characters, and here is where it starts raising flags. Now, before I go further, I'll have to give some context. In our group, one of the DM's friends, who we will call David, had joined, and he was a large devil's advocate, getting his kicks from annoying people to downright belittling them. He was friends with the DM for a long time, so he tolerated and brushed off his toxicity. The rest of us, however, made our views quite clear on him. The situation though, we decided to put things aside for the sake of not ruining our DM's birthday. During the first day, David mostly kept to himself and didn't really involve himself in the fun the rest of us were having. It wasn't until we started playing online games that his outward self started to emerge. Now, he hadn't participated during our school sessions, rather sitting and watching. Occasionally, however, we would backseat drive other people, telling them what they should have done and what bad choices we made. He didn't make any attempt to tell us how he would have done it, just how bad we were at playing. This is where our first complaints came from. During this weekend, I became the target of his harassment. Putting it into further context, when he did join the online gaming, he would make comments like, "Oh, he is on our team, well, there goes our win," or "Can you learn how to do this? You're embarrassing yourself." And this would go on for a while. I tried my best to keep my cool and let it slide, but occasionally I would snap back and our DM would have to rein us back in gently. With all that out of the way, the main bit of the story. So, our session starts. Our DM tells us our group was already returning to the city from a previous quest. He had all been hired for a job. This was his way of having our characters interact with each other, rather than your start in a tavern. Naturally, David kept himself and didn't say a word to anyone, not making any attempt at conversation or interaction, and yes, he was playing an evil rogue. When we got to town, we noticed that a huge festival is taking place. The Queen had given birth to a son and the next heir of the kingdom, and the King had pulled out all the stops to celebrate. We all had a good chuckle, seeing how the session was spur of the moment and the DM didn't have anything ready to go. Making our way in, we decided to split up, taking in the sights, asking around town about the happenings. During my time, I noticed a drunk NPC beating on his wife. The crowd around him too stunned to help. Now, my group knows the type of character I play. I picked my standard cleric, but not a robe-wearing healer. My cleric was a trained soldier looking to atone for his past sins and was more of a smiter of evil and support fighter. Seeing this going on, I intervene and give the drunk man one chance to stop, and naturally he doesn't. He comes at me and ends up with a broken jaw and torn knee, and thinking he might have friends looking for revenge, I pick up the bloody unconscious woman, take her to the local temple of Pelor. We played 3.5 edition and Pelor is the god of the sun, healing and smiter of evil and the undead, and was also my cleric's god. I explained to the priest what had happened, and they quickly found her a place to rest while they tended to her, and I offered to watch over her for the night, just in case. This is where David comes in. After our spats back and forth, he decided to continue it here. While we were all wandering around town, he had been passing notes to the DM telling him that he was following me, hidden in the crowd of people. After seeing what had happened, he continued to follow me to the temple. The crowd around the temple was thin, so the DM told him he could no longer hide among them and had to speak his actions out loud. He told the DM, "I'll wait until sunset outside of the temple, far enough away that no one will get suspicious." And instantly I knew what he was planning. Game on. As the sun began to set, he stepped onto the hollowed ground and his hair suddenly caught fire, singeing his scalp as he rolled on the ground to put it out. "What the hell?" he shouted. "I told you I would wait until dark. What happened?" The DM, "No. You said sunset, meaning the sun is still partially visible. You got off easy with just your hair catching fire." And blow one had been dealt, but still, he pressed on. Now, this time waiting until fully dark out, he made his way through the front door. You read that right. Didn't sneak through a window or try to sneak in the darkness. No, he just opened the large doors and stood in the entryway. My cleric had been sitting in front of the altar, the woman lying on a makeshift bed fully asleep. Hearing the door, I stand up and turn around, and the tension in game around the table grew thick. Everyone watching sat silently as I stared him down. He was just looking down at his character sheet, smirking. Our characters just eyed each other like a classic western movie, just waiting for the clock to strike noon. Well, midnight in this case. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke up. I draw my dagger and lunge my way past him as fast as I can, and I made my move as well to intercept. We both made a dexterity roll. Our quick draws would be the deciding factor, and the dice gods were on my side that day. His +3 was no match for my nat 20, and the guns were drawn. I told the DM I merely stick my armoured arm out and his rogue crashes face first, his feet giving out under him and his head slamming on the stone floor, putting him in a daze. But I wasn't done yet. This evil needed to be purged. Channeling the divine light of the sun itself, my gauntlets began to heat up until they were glowing hot. I grabbed his face with both hands, melting his skin into butter as he kicked and screamed, dragging his near-limp body towards the door and throwing him back out into the dirt. After that, I woke up the priest and explained what happened, asking them to get the guards and take him away. His character was taken to prison, and his gear stripped. The night went on, and the rest of us continued to celebrate and party both in-game and out. David, however, didn't even attempt to have his rogue breakout. The only thing he managed to do was catch and eat a rat raw for his dinner. Thinking his character was pretty much done for, he gave up and left the table for the rest of the night and didn't say a word for the rest of the weekend. He still gave me bad looks, but I would merely look back waiting for him to say something. He didn't. Moral of the story: D&D is a game where both friends and strangers get together and create experiences and memories. The good ones to look back on and talk about, and bad ones to remind us and teach us lessons. They are not any one person's personal playground to do with as they please, regardless of how others feel. In short, don't be like David, for if you do, the judgment of Pelor may just find you. TLDR, evil rogue attempts to murder a helpless woman. Fighting cleric overpowers him and punishes his sin with fire. So adventurers, what do you think of this character's revenge story? Personally, I think it's a very sweet blow of justice. But what do you think? Comment below and let me know. Thank you for joining us, take care, and we'll see you in the next adventure.